14th meeting of the Zoning Advisory Committee of Hopkinton. God, I used to live in Ashland, so at least I have that. So I'll start with the remote meeting script, and then I will share my screen. Okay, so my name is Mary Larson Marlowe. I would like to confirm that all the members are on the call. So please respond when I call your name. Sundar.
Present. Sundar Sivaraman present.
Curtis.
Curtis Smithson present.
Ted.
Ted Barker Hook present.
Madhu.
Madhumita Chandrasekhar present.
Rachel.
Rachel Rawson present.
And I'd like to say congratulations and thank you for being an official member of
Oh, okay.
You're officially signed in and are a voting member.
Thank you so much. And thank you to John for getting it to the finish line.
No problem.
Okay, Ria.
Ria McNamara present.
Ron.
Ron Foisey present.
And our staff, John.
John Gelsich present.
And it looks like we are missing John Coutinho at this moment, but hopefully he will join us. There's no anticipated speakers on the agenda. Okay, so good evening. This open meeting of the Hopkinton Zoning Advisory Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth, due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. I really want to rewrite that every time I hear it. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we are complying with the executive order that suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. All members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The executive order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, as long as the public body makes provisions through adequate alternative means to ensure interested members of the public are provided reasonable access to the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment, but no public hearings. So for this meeting, the Zoning Advisory Committee is convening by video conference via Zoom app. And additionally, the meeting may be broadcast by HCAM TV through one of its many channels or platforms. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. And anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Okay. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to screen share solar outline. There we go. Okay. Can you all see? This is the top of our notes and outline. It starts with our objectives. Just reviewing. We're talking about solar today. Surprise, surprise. And so our previously discussed objectives of the solar bylaw and any changes to the solar bylaw that we propose are to respect property owners' rights, those who wish to develop their land, and those abutters residents who wish to maintain the aesthetic and practical value of their property, to promote sustainable energy use, and also to promote protection of older growth trees and natural habitat, and to maintain the character of Hopkinton as a semi-rural, wooded, attractive landscape. So our outline, which we have discussed over the past few meetings, we went over some town council advice regarding health, safety, and welfare. That is we have to justify any changes, any restrictions that we place on solar based on public health, safety, or welfare. Some of the items that we've discussed so far, lot criteria, such as maximum size, minimum size, percentage of lot that can be developed, and setbacks. grade, ridge lines, density of solar panels, and height limit on panels. I believe we started the screening discussion and possibly did not completely finish it, but we did talk about the sight lines and having several elevation cross sections in the application. That was something that we definitely wanted to pursue. And then we can discuss additional wording regarding the screening, as well as maintenance of natural vegetation. In fact, here bolded, I have the restricting solar to previously disturbed land, because that was one of the things that seemed to possibly be something that we could include. And as long as we include some caveats about that no substantial clearing had been done within the past X number of years, 5, 10, whatever. But I would like to start, before we go back to talking about screening and natural vegetation, I'd like to have John review the stormwater regulations and in relation to solar installations, and get his professional opinion on whether or not the way that solar is reviewed for commercial solar installations, whether or not the stormwater regs are sufficient and the planning board has all of the tools that they need to address stormwater, erosion, water table, protection of private wells, et cetera, or whether we need to strengthen any of the language in the solar bylaw itself. Okay, John, do you want to share your screen for anything, or are you just going to speak?
Nope, I'm just going to speak.
And also, I just wanted to say that John Coutinho has joined us. Hi, John.
Ready?
Yes.
Hi.
All right. So the stormwater regulations don't necessarily speak to solar or anything. They don't really get into detail about any of the projects that they would regulate, but they're kind of a general set of regulations that just address drainage, runoff, infiltration, that type of thing. So I don't really see anywhere that solar would be different than, say, a subdivision or a site plan type approval. Anything that solar would be doing would likely also be done on another project, and therefore the stormwater regulations would take that into account. The solar panels themselves are at the DEP level considered, let's see if I get this right, segmented non-impervious, or some other term that would have counted against the impervious coverage percentage on the site, and they don't count because underneath they're pervious. They're not. So while the solar panel themselves might be impervious, underneath is pervious. And so if you were to compare it to a road or a parking lot or anything like that, while the ground underneath might be considered pervious, it's not the same as a solar panel. Basically anything like a road or a parking lot or any type of pavement, the concrete pads that would go on a solar site, those are going to be more of a stormwater issue than the panels themselves. I've seen in certain places when there is an issue with runoff with solar panels, you do a drip line, but that would be covered under the stormwater regulations as well. So, slopes are something that are regulated under the regulations. So, I mean, you can do other types of developments on slopes, and there's nothing that really stands out for solar that wouldn't really get covered under another type of development. So, long story short, I don't think there's anything that needs to be done specifically for solar in the stormwater regs. I think they cover pretty much everything. The other thing to note is that for most solar projects, they disturb over an acre of land, and that would trigger the stormwater management permit. And I don't really see an issue going through that process, as it stands right now. We've had several solar projects that go through that process, and I think everything's been covered stormwater wise. Whether there's an impact to wells, that's something that I don't think the stormwater regulations are really going to take into account, because that would be what would the runoff from the panels into the ground would be. So, and as far as I know, there's usually no runoff associated with that. That's, chemicals, because it's a glass top or some type of hard surface top. But that would be something that would be kind of investigated outside of the stormwater regulations anyway. So I think overall, the stormwater regulations are pretty comprehensive. They deal with developments that are similar in nature to solar developments and even more intensive. And therefore, I really don't think there's any need to focus on the impacts from solar developments within the bylaw as they relate to the stormwater regs or stormwater in general, because the stormwater regs cover basically all of that type of impact.
Okay, does anyone have questions? So in terms of the private wells, or actually, anything about the water table and water resources in town, is that something covered by the health department, or how else is that covered?
So there are laws in place for certain things. So I'm trying to remember what the example is. I want to say it's cell phone towers. So through the Telecommunications Act, it's basically stated that impacts from cell towers relating to things like cancer are not something that towns can discuss when they discuss whether to permit certain things like that, because it's been established that those towers do not have those type of impacts. I don't know if there's anything similar to solar, because I don't know if there's any kind of overriding study or policy that relates to what type of chemicals, if any, would be runoff from solar panels. But I would think if there's any type of chemical impact to the water table from runoff of solar panels, it would likely fall under the health department, because they do regulate wells. And I think there needs to be, I would have to look and see if there's any kind of guidance at the state level or the federal level to say this is something that's been established as no impact, or we've got a hard answer on whether solar panels contribute to pollution through chemical runoff. I haven't seen anything like that, but generally, and I'm not a solar scientist, I'm not a chemical scientist, but generally the solar panels have a plating over them, whether it's glass or plexiglass or some type of hard surface that would prevent chemical runoff from wherever. I mean, the batteries are encased and usually don't have any type of chemical composition that would hurt wells or anything like that. So I don't really know where those impacts would come from. I would think if somebody's asserting that there are impacts from runoff of solar panels, they would need to provide proof that that's happening, rather than have somebody provide proof that it's not happening. Just because I haven't heard of any reports of that type of runoff being an issue or anything like that. So that's where I came from with that.
And soil types, I don't know if it actually is appropriate under the stormwater regulations right here. If that has to do with the degree to which the soil can absorb water runoff.
So soil type is investigated with stormwater runoff and the stormwater review, because that impacts the infiltration rate. So any stormwater report usually has an investigation of the soil types.
Okay, good. All right, thank you. Anyone else with questions? No, okay. All right, thank you very much, John. I appreciate that. Okay, so I would like to go back to where we were on screening. As you may have noticed on the the solar bylaw itself, the changes that we made 2 years ago, approximately a year and a half ago, and that were approved, beefed up the wording and it included year-round screening, so an effective year-round screen, and it did added a few other words to, you know, possibilities for that for screening, you know, options. So that is the only change that was made very recently. I know in a recent approval, there was a condition added that the landscaping and all the screening had to be maintained for the lifetime of the project. So in previous conditions, the planning board had put things in like 5 years or 10 years, but we more recently had put in for the lifetime of the project. And that is something that we might want to put into the bylaw itself. My personal opinion on vegetation is that we don't specify types of vegetation that needs to be added, that it is something that is left to the planning board discretion and to negotiation with the abutters and so on. But I'm perfectly in agreement with, you know, possibly adding some wording about other possible ways to do screening. And particularly regarding the sightline elevations that Curtis reminded us of last time and also put into his notes to the bylaw, that I think that's what needs to be used by the planning board. And I think that's going to be a really useful addition to talk about sightlines. Any other thoughts on that?
Through the chair.
Mm-hmm.
So are we drawing a clear distinction between screening as in something that needs to be created by the developer in terms of, you know, new vegetation or new growth versus the next section, which is maintenance of natural vegetation, which could be a natural screening by basically saying pre-existing, we can put some boundaries of what can be cut and what cannot be. So, I mean, I know we're talking about having them do landscaping, but do these two go together? I mean, in situations where there is already some pre-existing vegetation. So, I mean, I just want to make sure that we tighten those regulations to say the natural trees and everything. I mean, the clear cutting should be only specific to a set amount of portion where the solar panels are going to be there. And then, of course, you know, beyond that, we can then have screening on top of that as well. I hope that the way we think about it is a complementary thing between natural vegetation preservation and then introduction of landscaping, aka screening, to augment what is a gap in the natural vegetation.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like the bylaw does include natural features. I think it lists landscaping, natural features, fencing, other objects. So yeah, we certainly wouldn't want to have them mow down a line of trees and then plant some little small ones to screen.
Precisely. That's exactly what I had. Yes.
Yeah, and that's always been the planning board's way of doing things for all types of developments. But let's make sure that the wording is, you know, is appropriate that way when we look over the exact wording changes in the bylaw. Any other thoughts on that?
Through the chair, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I was just skimming the bylaw that you offered to us in an email with, I think, Curtis's additions. When we talk about screening, are we talking about to abutters? Are we talking about to within a half mile? What is our thought on that?
Well, right now, I don't believe the wording specifies. And that's something that we could be more specific about in the wording of the bylaw.
I think that would be something worth taking a look at. It strikes me that you could build a 6-foot tree and put it right next to me and I can't see anything, but if I back up 20 feet, I can see over that tree perfectly.
Yeah, the wording in the model bylaw, I think, has a 300, it's a public road or public way within 300 feet. I don't know if that's the right number to use or not. But.
I'll offer again that 300 feet, I said these kind of things 2 weeks ago, seems like a lot, but then keep in mind that photo we saw of the Alexander Road development is 300 feet away. And so if you're 320, suddenly that's far enough that we don't have to worry about screening. And all that really is a house and a yard and a buffer zone away.
There's also the issue of noise buffering for those residential developments that are near highways. And we have 2 major highways cutting through town, so and some minor ones. Although, you know, not, I wouldn't say that anyone should be obligated to create a noise buffer where there wasn't one before, but if there has been a great deal of buffering from the trees, then there should be an effort to recreate some noise buffering for highways. Okay, so and this has just come up in a recent discussion around some changes to I don't think it's Saddle Hill, but it's in that vicinity of the 94-95 interchange, and it's talking about cutting trees and then replacing trees, and yeah, as Sundar and Curtis previously said, you know, it's the keeping the natural vegetation, and I'm particularly aware of the larger, older growth trees, as long as they're healthy, and maintaining those. I don't know how people would feel about any restriction on tall tree. I'm sorry, not on tall trees, but on trees over a certain caliper being cut and requiring a little bit more due diligence on that sort of cutting. So that it's, you know, it's all scrub, it's and all fairly, you know, small trees or small shrubbery, or then that would not be as bad for development as a bunch of old oak trees, for instance.
Yeah, through the chair. I think we spoke about this last time, where, you know, I had this radical notion of checkerboard pattern. That is precisely what we were moving towards, where, you know, this could, if we could permit that in some fashion, that would essentially create, you know, old trees that interspersing trees and the solar panels in some fashion. I would be very supportive of that. It's just that at that point, are we creating a conflict between the viability of the project and this? Meaning, what if the developer says, I really need a contiguous piece of land, I really can't have this tree or a set of trees there? I think it's good to consider that, but I think that discussion probably needs to be had. And does that become a subjective discussion at that point?
And it might be just getting too complicated and trying to create really crazy regulations. So, thoughts? Any other thoughts?
Through the chair,
Yes. Go ahead, Ron.
the Mass General Law 48, Section 3 is very restrictive at what we can do and what we can't do, or at least how the town council has indicated to us. At what point are we going to be looking at our recommendations for changes in light of the fact that it says you may not prohibit or unreasonably regulate the installation of solar except where necessary to protect public health, safety, or welfare? So, you know, out of our 4 objectives that we put here, you know, I don't know how protecting trees, while it is a terrific objective, but when we're doing that objective in light of restricting solar, I'm wondering when we're going to cross the line of unreasonably regulating solar and running afoul of this Mass General Law.
Well, I think that's fair. It's in our outline to review these things after we have narrowed it down to things that we think are practical changes, and then we have to review each one according to that criteria and see if they pass muster. Because I wanted to rule out all of the items that we don't even think are practical, because it, you know, and then of course we'll be guessing a little bit on what somebody in some future court of law might consider unreasonable. So we can only do the best we can on that one. Any other comments? Okay. So I'm personally in favor of adding some wording that strengthens, again, the screening. And this is particularly if we're talking about not restricting specifically the location beyond how it's restricted already. But if we don't, do an overlay map and we don't restrict the locations, then I do think that, we owe it to the town to consider strengthening screening options.
I would agree with that screening as being something that even if it wouldn't pass legal muster, I'm not sure a developer would necessarily sue the town because they're forced to do proper screening. So it's something that would at least, if we go back to Alexander Road, if proper screening had been put up there when that development went in, it would be a lot less objectionable than what it is today. And that we may be able to enforce and have stronger screening that developers would buy into and say that's worth it to us to make that happen.
Yeah. Okay. So hearing nothing else on this topic, we'll move on. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Stormwater regs we already covered. Gives anyone another shot at any of these topics within stormwater regs. Any questions that might have occurred to them since John gave us that overview? Nope. Okay, I don't see anything. All right. The next item is some of the administrative items regarding maintenance and abandonment, bond, payment in lieu of taxes, etc. I would like to stop sharing this outline at this moment and go to the annotated solar bylaw that Curtis marked up. Nope, is that the right one? Nope. No, it is not. Where is it? There we go. Do you see this 210-200? Okay, good.
Edits by CS.
With edits by CS. It's essentially the same thing I sent like a half an hour before, but with Curtis's inputs on it, which are very helpful. Okay. So we'll come back to some of these use regulations, but I would like to go to let's see here. Utility collections. Okay, that we're definitely going to go through. Okay, so let's go through the administration. There's this one letter I that's right above administration. Looks like it kind of fits into the same topic too. The commercial solar voltaic installation owner or operator shall maintain its facility in good condition. Maintenance shall include but not be limited to painting, structural repairs, continued compliance with landscaping and screening requirements, and integrity of security measures. Owner operator shall be responsible for maintenance of any access roads. Okay, so that's fairly straightforward. Okay, the special permit required. This is where we can add, since the special permit together with such plans, drawing specifications, fees, and additional information is required by the planning board, we could add the elevation cross sections to this list so that it's specifically required and that it's, you know, presented at the time a new special permit is applied for.
So, Madam Chair, we usually have the list of plans in the application form.
Uh-huh.
So I would think that's probably where it would be covered.
Okay.
I mean, it could definitely be changed to say plans and elevations as required, just so it's clear.
Okay. And Curtis has also presented higher up on this list, has presented the right wording.
Well, the plagiarized wording.
Yeah.
Straight out of the model bylaw. I didn't.
That works for me.
Modify much of it.
Okay. Emergency services. So could you, Curtis, could you talk about the emergency services and model bylaw that you're suggesting be added here or looked at?
This may be a requirement for approval through the planning board anyway, that details that the fire department would need coming on site to know about what's going on, I think should probably be included. You know, if there's a central cutoff that if everything's on fire, the fire department gets there before the owner does, can they kill the power to the site so they're not in danger when they're putting the fire out, or, you know, details like that is what I thought probably ought to be included with what's given to the town.
Okay. I'm sorry, I did not have a chance to check. Is this section right below the highlighted section? Is that from the model bylaw or is that?
That's
okay, that's from the model bylaw.
Yes, looks like some of the stuff, yeah.
All right.
There were some things that didn't get highlighted that were my revisions, so.
Okay, so that yeah, I wasn't clear on that, sorry. All right, and this is something that I suggest, John, you know, we review offline and just make sure that, you know, if this is not covered clearly in the, I don't know what it would be, special permit application process or whatever else that we could add the wording. All right. I see you nod your head. So, okay. Hazardous materials. So this is also from the model bylaw.
Yeah, that was all added.
Okay, thank you. So right now we do talk about pesticides, herbicides.
Oh, that's added also.
But oh, this is from the model bylaw because I'm pretty sure we have some stuff like that in there.
Could be.
Conservation.
Just for clarity, the model bylaw, we're talking about this tough study in the
yeah.
Right.
I just want to be clear. I understood what we were talking about.
Yeah, there's the Tufts study report and there's the model bylaw that they created. You know, there were two different documents.
Right.
Okay,
I figured that's what we were talking about. I just wanted to be clear.
You're right that anything referencing special permit granting authority is definitely from the model bylaw because that's not us. That's not our wording. And this about the Department of Public Works given full notice for hazardous materials, et cetera. So, okay. Okay, such conditions. Okay, so that is again something that I'll edit this again and just make sure that it's very clear in the next iteration what is in our current bylaw versus what are suggested additions. I apologize for that. I just didn't quite have time.
Well, I gave you almost a half hour. That should have been
Okay, so right now our facility does, or our bylaw does say any special permit issued shall be subject to conditions and safeguards the planning board may prescribe. Such conditions may include, that's a typo. The requirement of a performance bond secured by deposit of money or negotiable securities posted with the town to guarantee proper maintenance and or removal of the commercial solar voltaic installation. The amount of the performance bond shall not exceed the estimated cost. That's the part of the removal. Okay. Is that part of our bylaw dictated by law, John? Shall not exceed the estimated cost?
I don't know if that's dictated by law.
Okay.
I would guess not.
Okay.
I don't think they go into specifics like that, but it may be. I'm not familiar with that.
All right. Okay, so that's something that we should consider, whether or not the bond, whether it's justifiable and whether it needs to be increased for the safety of the town. And this is really, we've never had to deal with the removal of one of these installations at this point. We do have this wording and it is in conditions for any approvals for these special permits. But at the same time, we've never had to deal with the removal, so we don't know what complications may come up. And the model bylaw may be very useful to review from that standpoint. Okay. And discontinuance. This talks about a discontinued when it has not been in service for a 24-month period, and then our municipal inspections has to notice them. So the onus is on the town from that standpoint. And then they must respond within 30 days. And let's see, so it's 24 months plus 30 days. And then it says it must remove it within 3 months here. Okay, so those are the three things: 24 months plus 30 days plus 3 months.
I have a question, a practical question.
Yeah.
Since a solar farm doesn't create any emissions, how do you know whether it's being used or not?
I have no idea.
Possibly know.
I have no idea. I really don't.
If the onus is on the town to say, hey, you're not using your solar farm, how? That seems like a bizarre situation.
So I don't know how the town could in the future regulate this, but I know like the East Main Street solar array that's been constructed is known by the building department to not be connected to the grid. So I don't know if at some point when the solar array is disconnected because it's just not efficient enough or whatever else would precede the discontinuance of the use, if the building department or some other department gets a notice that it is being disconnected by the utility company. That's something I can look into. I don't know what the threshold is to, notify people, or if there isn't even a threshold to notify people that it's being disconnected or is no longer in use.
Curiosity, for how long has that been true about the East Main Street grid?
Pretty much since it's been built. They, I don't know what the reason is, but they have not been connected to the grid. They're connected, but they're not like basically generating energy at this point. I don't know what the reason is.
Oh my gosh.
Through the
So,
chair.
yeah, so I'd like to, consider an annual reporting mechanism from what other entity owns it, or from the utilities, or whatever is appropriate, to say whether or not these things are in service or not. And that at least gives us something to act on. So,
Through the
yeah.
chair.
Yes.
So just out of curiosity, we are having this particular conversation. Why? I mean, if I don't know how towns make money out of solar farms, but as long as we continue making money, why would this not be considered a viable operation? As why does the production of electricity actually has to do, when once it's been established, even if it goes dormant, for lack of a better term, does it continue to be a money-making enterprise for the town? And if the answer to that is yes, why does it matter whether it produces or doesn't produce electricity at that point?
Through the chair.
Go ahead.
If I could give an offer, I think that if we are going to do some damage to neighborhoods, and if we are going to chop down trees, the payoff is supposed to be a greener energy grid. But if we're going to chop down trees and do damage to neighborhoods and then not improve our green energy production, what's the point? I don't think that our goal is to have solar for whatever amount of, I guess, is small tax revenue we get. Our goal is to cut back on greenhouse gases if we are to allow them.
Ted,
I would-
very.
I would
through the
also
chair.
suggest that
Sorry.
I would also suggest that, first of all, tax revenue, we'll probably get tax revenue from the site, whether or not it has solar installed on it. Obviously, more so with solar installed than dormant. But I think the biggest thing is that we don't want it to just sit there forever and rust and corrode, and then possibly start leaking chemicals. So we want to have a mechanism to make sure that it will be properly disposed of. No big metal construction is left there, and the site is revegetated. So.
Oh, so through the chair.
Yep.
Now you're making a larger point. So I was going to equate this to any empty building, which has not been used for years together. In that situation, we do not ask the owner to tear it down and revegetate the property. So by introducing the revegetation clause, you are opening the door for something net new here, which I did not realize. So, I mean, sounds like an intriguing idea. So as I said, I was equating this to any other business that could be lying rusted, to your point. And I don't know what discretion the town has, and I was equating it in the same manner with this. And Ted, through the chair, the point that Ted was making was valid, but by that time the damage has been done. The solar has been, the trees have been wiped out, the solar farm has been put in place. So I don't think there is a backseat at that point, right? So the way I was thinking about this was, as long as this continues to be a net tax gain for us, should we or should we not be worrying about the discontinuation? But then you make a valid point about revegetation as well. Yeah, so I'll stop.
Sundar, did you say a backseat? I like that. No backseat.
Through the chair,
Mhm.
right?
Yes, please.
There are communities in our country that do require abandoned buildings to be removed after they've been abandoned for a period of time. We don't have that necessarily here, but I want to point something out. Hopkinton is 17,024 acres in total. That's all the land we have. The 3 projects that you highlighted in the handout that we looked at for size and coverage reflects 12% of our total land area. I know, according to John, there's a couple more either in permits or being constructed or whatever. I don't know what that total is going to look like. But I think I have to remind everybody the reason we're having this discussion is because there are several people who have contacted the town saying they don't want to have these solar farms. So if we have 12% of our land coverage is a solar farm today with just these 3 projects, and I don't know about the other ones, what are we looking at to use our land in the future? The people came here to Hawkinton to hike, to, be involved with, the land, not to be working around solar farms. I'm all for solar. I have achieved lead green associate back in 2011. I'm in the middle of my continuing education classes again. And it just strikes me that this is not what we're looking for. I don't know how much more we want to go through all the detail of the regulations on this, but frankly, we have to make it easy, quick, and simple for town meeting approval. And that means we just have one thing we have to change: the size of the solar farm. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right. So I just don't know, John G, is requiring an annual report or is anything like that appropriate? Is that something that we could have done so that we understand what the status of each facility is?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that would be too out of the way of just having any developer or operator submit a letter to the building department confirming that the solar is still in use or still active. I don't think that would be unreasonably restricting.
Okay, that at least gives us some information on which to act. Should we decide to do anything with that?
Just to add, Mary, based on the model bylaw, they had a section for monitoring. So if we are allowed to have a monitoring section in our bylaw, maybe that's where we can require report, annual updates and stuff like that.
Now, just to be clear, any changes to this bylaw are not going to apply to the existing solar arrays.
Understood.
Through the chair, I know we are referencing the model bylaw. I don't think we've actually ascertained that large sections of the model bylaw have made it to the actual town regulations in the town of Ethel. So the model bylaw seems, in my mind, a tad aspirational at this point. But I think we want to probably try to equate to whether how much of this actually made it into the actual bylaws in the town of Ethel.
I agree. I don't think it all did. And I think that it is aspirational. But that's why I think that, anything that we decide to think about adding, we'll have to review carefully the wording. And of course, it's going to go through town council before it goes anywhere else too. So, okay.
And along the same lines, Mary, a question that popped into my head is, let's pretend, just for discussion, that all of this stuff in yellow we decide to propose to add. And let's pretend the planning board likes it all. Are all of those individual votes at town meeting? Is it one vote per section? How does that break down? So the way that town council has explained it to us in the past is that it's the whole bylaw. It's every single change that we propose at a given town meeting is one vote. It's all together. So when we come to the final, what should we change this year? My suggestion is that there are a lot of good administrative changes that we could put into a future year. It doesn't mean we can't, we have to introduce it all in one big change. Okay. That doesn't mean that I want to discuss it for the entire 2021.
I really like to conclude most of our solar discussions this year.
It would be great to get back to the sign bylaw.
Okay, you got it. Okay, let's see. I'm going to give you all vertigo by paging up very quickly. All right. So some of the other wording changes, I need to move your faces off to the right here. Okay, so I can see. Some things from the model bylaw that Curtis picked out. This is about setbacks and screening requirements. May increase these setbacks in districts if they determine it to be appropriate based on project and site-specific considerations, such as solar array type, topography, tree cover, to allow for consideration of factors that may mitigate glare and other aspects or other impacts to abutters. Written consent of the affected abutters. I don't know what that would refer to. Oh, interesting. For ground-mounted solar voltaic installations in all zoning districts, front, side, and rear setbacks are required to be at least XX feet. Okay. Yeah, I think we discussed this last time that sometimes the setback requirements are kind of a paper tiger. I feel that the way the bylaw is written, that the planning board does have a lot of leeway in terms of determining if topography, tree cover, et cetera, to mitigate glare and other impacts. But I definitely think we could strengthen some of the language, but still allowing planning board that kind of leeway in terms of adapting it to the location rather than everything has to meet the set, detail. Other thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I had pretty much included it just because it said that you could ask for more than what is required, maybe not to the specifics that were in the model bylaw. Just in some cases, you may want to have the authority to require more than what is specified for that particular zoning district.
Okay.
Maybe condense that down to something similar to that.
Okay. All right. On item D here, I know, John Gelsich, you've gone through this with us before. Site plan review shall not apply. Why does the site plan review not apply? And I think it's because the special permit and the site plan are very much the same in many ways.
Yeah, so it's my understanding that this was put in because the review required as part of the special permit essentially covers everything that would be required under the site plan. So it would basically have them go through the same process twice for no reason, from my understanding.
Okay. Okay. So this sight line representation, this is Curtis, this is also from the model bylaw?
Right.
Okay. So sightline representation shall be conducted by a professional landscape architect drawing from any portion of a public road or public way within 300 feet or within sight of the installation that would have the clearest view of the proposed facility, and from the closest side of each residential building within 300 feet or in sight of the most visible point of the installation. Each sightline shall be depicted both in a site plan and elevation drawings. The sightlines must include all intervening trees, buildings, and other applicable objects. A glare analysis and proposed mitigation, if any, to minimize the impact of glare on affected properties, and existing and proposed photographs from at least 4 perspectives specified by the planning board, including from the nearest residential structures and of the areas that are most publicly visible, with technical explanation of how visualization was produced. Each sightline shall be illustrated in color photographs of what can currently be seen from any public way within 300 feet and/or within sight of the installation. Each of the existing condition photographs shall have the proposed installation superimposed on it to show what will be seen from public roads if the installation is built. So I really think that we can use a lot of that language, not necessarily word for word, but it makes a lot of sense to me. And clearly specifying, what we expect from the applicants is always, I think, important, and that we're not sending them back after the first application saying, oh, no, we need this too, and we need this too. At least they'll know ahead of time. And I think that that's, the appropriate way to do it.
Through the chair.
Yes.
I'm just curious if there is small problem here. If an application comes in spring, when the trees are in full bloom and the sight line looks one way, the photographs and all those things, but in reality the impact to abutters would happen only in fall and winter when trees shed their leaves. Are we making this some kind of an onerous requirement on the applicant? How would they satisfy that particular requirement if it's not just the time of the year?
I think
sight lines, do you remember the sight line diagram that Curtis showed us last meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so from my perspective, that is, that has nothing to do with the foliage that's there right now.
Okay.
Photographs, you're right. It would be pretty hard to, directly show what every season is going to be.
Okay.
But the sight lines, it's just showing what's going to be visible. And yes, there are some trees there, perhaps in the buffer zone, but it gives the planning board more of a perspective of yes, but from the top of that second story of that house abutting, you could see right into it and that sort of thing.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, a lot of landscape architects actually do have software that can do the 4 seasons.
Okay.
So I don't know how common it is, but I've seen it quite frequently in the private sector.
Okay.
Good. Okay. Makes sense.
Okay. I'm not worried about lighting at all because basically these don't have lighting. Thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
as long as we're looking, I wonder about solar glare. Isn't the whole point of a solar panel to get rid of glare because that's lost energy? But I don't live on Alexander Road. I don't know if there's a whole lot of glare coming off of those panels. I think they're designed to resist glare because that's lost money.
I think so too. I don't know, but at least what we've been told by solar companies is that essentially they don't have any glare these days. So.
Ted, they must be using stealth technology because only stealth can.
I don't know. It makes sense to me that whatever is glaring off is lost money, but I don't know how effectively they reduce glare. But I agree. I've heard the same thing from the solar company, that there's no glare, but that would be nice for them to say if they're trying to get people to give it a thumbs up. I don't know. I think Mr. Kimball's on the line. Maybe he can tell us about glare from Alexander Road. I don't know. But maybe we don't need to belabor it. It's just one line.
Oh, but we do have somebody with a hand raised. Brian? Mr. Paris?
Yeah, this is Brian Paris. Thanks. Relative to this issue, the word that comes to mind is blinding. Blinding glare.
Wow.
I encourage any one of you to come by our neighborhood early in the morning and watch the sunrise on the solar panels. It's unavoidable. It's unavoidable. And it's not just the solar panels themselves, it's the metallic structures that support the solar panels. And the fact that they're above eye level no matter what. And you're not necessarily looking exactly at the solar panels themselves, you're looking at all the metal structures. So not only does it glare off the solar panel, it glares off the support mechanisms as well. But the word is blinding.
Thank you for
Thank
that,
you.
Mr. Paris. I was actually wondering about the support stuff and what that's made out of.
So if
Could
you look at,
state, just for the minutes, can you state your name and address? I'm
oh,
sorry.
I'm
Brian.
sorry, it's Brian Paris, 68 Teresa Road.
Thank you.
One of the potential abutters to the expanded 147 Lumber Street project. And I should also mention, through the chair, if I may, if you look at some of the pictures of the existing structure, you'll see that you're looking at the back end of it too. The solar panels face up the hill, so the neighbors, the abutters, are actually looking at the underside of the structure as it goes up the hill away from themselves, away from their homes. So they're not even looking at largely they're not looking at the business end of it. They're looking at the underside of the mechanical structure that holds up the solar panels. It's awful. If you haven't driven by Alexander Road, I strongly encourage it. As a matter of fact, if you'd like to contact me, I'll take you on a walking tour, socially distanced, of course, a walking tour of what it looks like. And you will be appalled at how prominently the structures dominate the landscape in that neighborhood. And they are 300 feet away, but I tell you what, you'd never know it by the looks of them. They're right on top of you.
Through the chair.
Yes, Ted.
Mr. Paris, thank you. And I drive through that neighborhood maybe once a month so I can see what the different seasons are. While I don't live there, I think I have a handle. But I wonder if you could give me a guesstimate. How tall would the greenery have to be for adequate screening from your neighborhood?
So through the chair again, that's a great question because I've stood there and tried to do the angles myself. And although it's not a 10% grade rolling up the hill, it goes up for a long time. I would say that a berm would need to be approaching 40 feet high to be able to block those structures from the street.
And that was
Through the chair,
specifically because of that, the
topography.
the slope, the topography, yep, that we talked about last time. Yep.
Absolutely.
I assume that doesn't necessarily help the second floor from a house. That's from standing on the street. So
From standing on the street, which of course is probably maybe 100, 125 feet further away than the back deck of those homes. You know, one of our neighbors, and I'm speaking for him, and I don't mean to, Rick Voss is across the street in Teresa Road, and he says he can't look at it in the morning because the glare is so bad.
Wow.
So it's an eyesore. You know, if we knew then what we know now.
thank you for speaking up. I'm glad you were there to respond to my query.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, I think that also kind of speaks to where the screening is located. Dictating that it be at the property line may not be the proper thing to do, given
Exactly.
the topography. So in that case, it sounds like something closer to the panels themselves might have been a better option rather than having a fence at the property line.
That's right. And at least in the case of another recent solar permit, there was additional screening added on the butters' properties in certain places because it was appropriate for the topography, and that would provide the best screening for certain situations. So, okay, what I'm showing here
Through the
right
chair.
now. Sorry, go ahead, Sundar.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the gentleman who just spoke, Mr. Paris, spoke about how the support structures also had, I'm guessing, some level of glare associated with them. Would we have an opportunity to maybe add some language to say those should not be bare metal and maybe they should be painted black or something along those lines to absorb some of the light? Again, obviously, we're not going to be able to paint something over the panel itself, but the support structures, we could maybe add some language.
Definitely. I did put in notes around that. The metal support structure has glare, and explore your painting or other mitigation. Okay, good. So this is what we have right now in terms of the clearing of natural vegetation. Shall be limited to the minimum necessary for the construction, operation, and maintenance of the facility, except as otherwise prescribed by applicable laws. And this is the wording that you took from the model bylaw, this part here. So the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources strongly discourages locating solar voltaic installations on sites that would require extensive tree cutting. Nonetheless, it happens. Shall be limited to absolutely necessary, determined by Planning Board, Conservation Committee. Is this in our current bylaw? I think it is. Developer of the construction, operation and maintenance. Okay. No, because that repeats some of the same wording, but maintenance of wildlife corridors and trail networks. Where these paths may be impacted, plans are required to show alternative trail alignments and wildlife corridors. Although no rights of public access may be established hereunder. And the installation design shall minimize fragmentation of open space areas and shall avoid permanently protected open space. Well, that's an obvious one. You know, it's permanently protected. So we wouldn't have an issue at all if all of this land that we would love to see protected was owned by the public, but it isn't. And that's the point, you know, is that we can't say you can't develop it because the public doesn't own it. But we do have this language in the bylaw that talks about you have to pay attention to this. The planning board will pay attention to this in the plans, and planning board does, you know. They look at the wildlife corridor, they look at the, you know, the trails that exist and so on. But they cannot absolutely require a company with solar to allow people to use their land for trails. That's not something that they can do right now. And I don't think it's legal for planning board to do that. But where there are trails and where the applicant is willing to maintain trails and wildlife corridors, the planning board does its best to negotiate that and encourage it strongly. But that stuff is already in there. So you basically see what planning board is able to do with the language that is currently in here. And they aren't able to stop the clear cutting of lots of trees. It just simply is not possible for planning board to say, no, there's no clear cutting. You know, you have to leave old growth trees. You have to do that. So that is not something that they are, have any jurisdiction on restricting. So,
Madam Chair, if I could just jump in. It looks like that section that's highlighted in green is not included in the bylaw.
Okay.
Section of the bylaw that deals with clearing of natural vegetation is section 210.202H, and it just says clearing of natural vegetation shall be limited to the minimum necessary for the construction, operation, and maintenance of the commercial solar photovoltaic installation, except as otherwise prescribed by applicable laws, regulations, and bylaws or the special permit.
Okay.
Yeah, and all of that was what I added from the model bylaw.
Okay.
All the way down to, well, pretty much that whole page looks like.
Well, even the applicant shall be required to submit a landscape plan and erosion and
yeah, that's all from the model.
That's all.
Yeah,
from
all
me.
we had was, a few sentences, so I just was kind of pulling some of the other stuff. And then the agricultural soils would basically mean if you had a field that had been in use for years, it would be a shame if they just came in and bulldozed everything out, dug it up, put in giant concrete foundations, destroyed it from being used as an agricultural field in the future. That's what that kind of pertains to.
Okay. So this part here is about the fields and maintaining the agricultural farmland.
Yeah, I think it's basically requiring screw type or helix foundations rather than, open cut and putting giant concrete foundations that disturb the ground considerably. It may be going way too far. I just dropped it in there. It seemed like that was the area that would pertain to if we wanted to include something like that.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's a starting point from which we can add it. Good. All right. And then I know definitely now there's landscape and erosion and sedimentation control. That's part of what they present. Again, this could indeed provide more detail of what we expect from applications, but I believe that all of these things are normally included in this section right here.
Yes, some of it may be included in the requirements for the specific districts, zoning districts.
Yeah.
So this may be shown somewhere else also, and therefore not appropriate here. But
okay. Okay, good. So, all right. I'm going to go back to the other screen share I have. And in the meantime, Mr. Paris, would you like to speak?
Yes, I would. This is again Brian Paris from 68 Teresa Road. Madam Chair, I just had a question. A lot of the rules and regulations bylaws that we're talking through, do they apply to the owner of the land or the operator of the solar installation if they are in fact different? Because I know that in 147 Lumber Street, the owner talks about the tenant, and the tenant owns the solar facility. So he's leasing the land to the tenant who's then running the full solar facility. And so who has liability for any of the provisions that the committee has been talking about in terms of compliance or safeguards or regulatory compliance? So that's my question. If you please.
John Gelsich, do you have an answer for that?
So they would generally apply to the operator, but it's really who the applicant is in the special permit. And then, so usually it's not the owner that's the applicant. The owner is listed as the owner, and then the solar company is the applicant because they're the one that's going to have the lease. So the provisions of the special permit apply to the operator in that situation. I don't know what relationship the owner would have. Probably not much, because I would assume the owner is indemnified through any type of lease that they would have with the solar operator. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. It does. Again, through the chair. So does your contact, does your negotiation, does your contract, if you will, is that with the operator who wants to come in and build the facility? Or is it in fact with the owner who wants to sponsor the development of it? And then can the owner essentially step aside with no responsibility with regard to ongoing compliance?
So the operator is usually or I shouldn't say operator, it's the applicant of the special permit is the one that's being negotiated with in this situation. The owner can step aside. I mean, that's usually how it would be if they have a lease, because if I were the solar developer, I wouldn't want the owner impacting my income through the solar, or my design for the solar, when they're not really having any stake in it other than just having the lease. So the operator or the applicant is really the one that's kind of answering all the questions, making all the promises, and making sure the compliance is there. Otherwise, I would assume, the owner is not liable per their lease agreement with the operator. The operator is going to be the one that's be liable for maintenance and conformance of the array to the bylaws. I mean, a lease agreement may be different in certain situations, but just thinking from my perspective, if I was a solar operator and the owner is not controlling anything of my my operation other than just owning the land, which I've leased from them, I wouldn't want them involved in any negotiations, making promises that I would then have to uphold.
Again, through the chair, I understand that. So that's a great explanation, and I appreciate that. But to date, when we talk about this, we talk about owners of parcels of land being able to do whatever they want with their parcel of land. But that seems to include, kind of abdicating responsibility to someone they're leasing the land to take care of the requirements of the town of Hopkinton.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody wants to operate solar in town, they need to comply with the bylaw. And if the owner wants to make that opportunity available for somebody on their land, their interest is making that opportunity available. Whether an operator wants to comply or not is not generally up to the owner. Just like if you lease an apartment to somebody, if they're doing something that's not right, I guess in most situations, you're not necessarily going to be held responsible because it's, they're doing it on their lease. I don't know if that's the greatest example, but
again, I think it's a great example, but it also speaks to how stringent the bylaws need to be, because essentially the people coming in developing the solar farms are not our neighbors. They are essentially companies that don't care about Hopkinton coming in to just use the land as they see fit. So they don't have a vested interest in the value of Hopkinton or the appeal of Hopkinton. All they want to do is make a profit off of Hopkinton, and they don't care. They're not our neighbors. They're just, third-party companies coming in to commercialize it. So I think that makes your role even more important as the safeguarders, if you will, of the town. I'll get off my soapbox. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ferris.
Thank you.
Okay, I switched back over to our outline. So we talked about the maintenance and abandonment bond, payment in lieu of taxes.
Through the chair, can I ask a question about taxes? It's mentioned here, and given that these are proposed bylaws for an application, does any of this relate to ongoing payments of taxes that happen, after something's been approved? I guess I was just looking for some clarification on why there's a discussion of taxes here, which I see as more of an ongoing kind of year-to-year thing instead of a sort of a planning piece.
I'm not sure how we got payment in lieu of taxes on this outline. I can't remember. It's just something that came up and we got down to the outline, but I think it was referenced in the model bylaw someplace.
Mary.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's exactly it. And I also don't know a lot about taxes, but my understanding is that there are significant tax breaks to solar companies, which is part of what makes this so profitable, which means then the town is not getting as much money. So in the model bylaw, they had some line about payment in lieu of taxes instead of the taxes which aren't being collected because there's tax breaks. So I think that's where it came from. I don't know if that's part of a zoning bylaw or if that's part of a planning board discussion or what, but that's where it came from in our outline.
Okay. And as far as I know, at least none of the things that I've been involved in on planning board have been giving any tax breaks to any solar installations. So John,
I
do you know
think that
anything
the
about?
state is offering tax breaks, I believe.
State is, yeah.
Which I think, I'm going to keep saying I think. I think that means the town doesn't receive as much in taxes as we might normally.
Okay. John, any?
Yeah, I'm unaware of the connection between the tax breaks at the state level and the local tax generation. I don't know if the state tax breaks apply to local taxes. I'd have to talk to the assessor about that. I'm not familiar with that whole situation.
Through the chair, this is Rachel again. I guess I have just a follow-up question there. Does the planning board have the ability to affect regulations related to ongoing solar farms? Is there ability to require reporting on an ongoing basis with taxes paid? Or given our earlier discussion about owners of the land, I assume the owners pay taxes to the town, right? They own the land. So is that part of this review, or is that a separate discussion?
Bylaws are what we deal with in zoning bylaws are not grandfathered. So it only affects future development. Any changes we make will not affect anything that has been approved in the past, or obviously built in the past. I don't know if other changes can be made at a different level, at the select board level or anything like that, that would affect things. John?
If I may, through the chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's a general bylaw versus a zoning bylaw. A general bylaw can go backwards, but a zoning bylaw can only go forward, and that's what it is. And that would have to come out of a board of selectmen, especially when you start talking about taxes and all that stuff. That's all affected by the board of selectmen, and then it goes higher than that.
So we might suggest to the select board, this is just a note for future, but this annual reporting, once we determine exactly what we're looking for, this, it would have to come through them to affect past developments. Okay. Something to consider. All right. So, where are people's feelings right now about an overlay to our zoning map for solar? I'm just going to go around and ask each of you to comment on that. And it's okay not to have a good answer. You can just say that if you're undecided. So Ted, you go first.
That's a big general question you asked. My general answer is I fear that all of the stuff we've been working on, number one, would be difficult to pass at town meeting. And number two, would ultimately have very, very, very little teeth because so much of it is worded in a way that makes it all squishy. So ultimately, I think, while I'm on board with exploring everything we've done and presenting the planning board with as many options as possible, I think to achieve what we initially set out to do a year ago, what I heard at our most recent town meeting in the fall, I think we need to keep working on a zoning overlay and maybe find our wording in a way that makes it more sustainable than some fear it might be. I think the real answer is through the overlay more than all of these other changes.
Sundar.
I knew you would catch me. I would love to go last. I mean, I don't know. I'm torn between some of the comments that we've heard from people here, whose primary concern is it is an ISO. There is really no other way of putting it. I also hear Ria's comments about why people came to this town and so on and so forth. At the same time, I am I'm actually on Ted's side. Maybe we should be approaching this from the overlay side and seeing what the best options are, and then coming up with everything else we've spoken about thus far. So yeah.
Okay. Ria.
Oh boy, you want to talk to me again? I don't know. I think I made it clear. I know I was in the Hopkinton Independent last week. We just have so much land in our town, and the reason why the solar farm companies are coming to us is because we do have so much land, and they're not going to Newton. I mean, they're not going to Wellesley. They're not going to the places we'd like to look like, on some level. They're coming to us because we have so much land. Well, right now we have over 12% of our land dedicated to solar farms. Now, the overlay district, if we picked some place small, like, I don't know, Western Wellesley did, we would achieve that. It'd be easier to do it that way, I suppose. But we're not hearing a whole bunch of people coming to these hearings saying, oh, I have, 400 acres, I want to do a solar farm. Now we're hearing all the other people who are getting affected by the solar farms. And that's really why I think we have to look at something that restricts the solar farm for the health and well-being of the community, and make it as simple as possible to pass a town meeting. And I think we can do this. But all these other details are well-meaning, but it's just, we don't need to even go there if we just have something simple like
You're just
no solar.
calling me.
What's that, John? What's going on, John? It's simple. We just make it, a 2-acre parcel that can be used for solar farm, and bam, it doesn't happen anymore. We don't really need to have this use anymore. We've got enough of it here. I mean, I just feel very, very strongly about not needing another solar farm in the town of Hopkinton.
Okay, thank you. Ron.
My biggest concern in this whole thing is going back to the prohibition from the state on restricting solar development. And I agree with Ria that developers are not looking at Wellesley, Weston, Newton, Natick, because the cost of land there is so prohibitively expensive that they can't make it work. But they are coming here, and they're doing it for economic reasons because there's a lot of demand. Again, so I'm basically opposed to an overlay district just from the standpoint of I think that we would open ourselves up to a major lawsuit that's going to be extremely expensive to the town.
Rachel?
I don't necessarily have an opinion yet. I'm listening.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fair enough. Madhu?
Hi, sorry, just had to unmute myself. My opinion is right now the solar bylaws are pretty open, right? As it is written, people are coming in, more developers are trying to get in because we don't have much restrictions. So I feel like because when we try to narrow down the overlay district, we were having some trouble coming up with what are the criteria? What can you allow? What can you reject? And all that stuff. I am happy that we are at least putting some as a backup option. The language is going in first. And in addition, we are looking at overlay district, but the language will keep us protected so that no other future project sneaks in with less screening. No other thing comes in with messed up state or something like that. So I'm happy that we are working on the language, and I hope that we get to an overlay district, but I feel like that seems to have too many more questions than this. So like the approach. So
Okay, thank you. John Catino.
So the way I look at it is, these hard, difficult changes should be difficult to pass at town meeting. Right now we're saying, oh, we don't have people coming out saying, oh, I have 400 acres, I have 200 acres that want to do it. People don't come to see us, as you know. You've been doing this now for a few years, and I think I'm up to 13 now. People don't come to our meetings. It might be easier for them to see them in Zoom right now, but people just talk about it for the first time. Somebody sees something, it comes up at town meeting, and we all look at each other saying, okay, we've been working on this for 2 years. When we think about the sign bylaws and the lighting bylaws, and the really tough ones take a lot to get through. They take a lot out of us, they take a lot out of the planning board, and they take a lot out of town meeting. And I get it. And doing this so many years, I get that we want to get stuff through town meeting and clean and get the changes done nice and easy and as efficiently as possible. However, when we're talking about limiting, green energy, we have to think of it like that. Yes, we want to save trees and everything. Actually, I hate to tell Ted, that's what I did all day. I was cutting down trees and vines. I hope there's so many dead trees at this lot that I was working on. Vines just absolutely killed so many beautiful trees, and they just, it was horrible. But it's what it thinks. So we really do have to be really careful. There are a lot of people that don't want them near their homes, and they don't want to see them as they drive by. But we really do have to embrace green energy. It's one of the great things about Hopkinton. I didn't know it was 12%, Ria. Thank you very much for telling me. That's something we actually could be proud of. Is that we have such a green energy. We're a stretch energy code town also. When we build houses in Hopkinton, they have to meet incredible criteria. That's something to be proud of. But we should look at this, but we should be careful of how many changes we do, and we should really listen to the people. It's not going to be something that's going to sail through. This is a difficult one. This is on the level of sign bylaw and lighting bylaw when it starts to come down to it. So it's not going to be an easy one. So we can't look at it that let's just try and see if we can get through town meeting quickly. Let's continue to work on this. It's an important one. I absolutely see both sides, because I love, one of my favorite things in town is our trail routes, and walking through the woods. I just love it, and I don't want to see any of that changed. However, I don't own. I only own a few homes in town, and it's we have to be careful of other people's property rights, but we also have to be careful of the view sheds. So we're going to have to keep balancing this, and I think we're doing a great job. It's taken us a long time. We may not even get it through this this town meeting. If we get it to the next one, but we do it right, that's the most important thing. So sorry I had the longest answer, but we're doing a great job. We really are. We're plowing through this stuff. We're beating it up, but that is our job. Our job is to beat this stuff up and get as many opinions as possible, so that it does limit, so that everybody's thought might already be in there, that people that come up to want to speak. But that's my 30 cents worth. So thank you for listening. And sorry I haven't been on video. I didn't have, I just was, as I said, I was cutting down trees. I didn't like my outfit, so I blanked myself out.
Quite all right.
I'm vain. Sorry.
And Curtis.
I'm not real sure the overlay district is the right way to go. I think beefing up the bylaw with requirements on clearing, which seems to be a major issue, making sure we don't have eyesores by having a fairly strict view, taking into effect what the view is going to be, and maybe going a little further, which may be something that doesn't go over well, but we keep saying, well, we can't tell people not to cut these, and I go back to Libertyville, Illinois, they had a specimen tree. When you get to a certain size, that tree is regulated.
Mhm.
It is an integral part of what Hopkinton's about. Maybe in addition to what we're talking about here, maybe some forestry management or specimen tree type things need to be looked at. So they do have a little bit more teeth on preserving some of the older growth areas. But I guess that's kind of my simple easy solution. Have some bylaws that have a little teeth to them, so we can kind of push forward what we want to see in town. And I don't know that a solar farm, down in a valley that nobody can really see is going to bother people as much as one that's on the side of the hill like this one out on here on Main Street is. So yeah, having something to regulate the view and maybe cut down or reduce the clearing, some bylaw modifications would be the best way to get into it and kind of restrict the parts we don't like about the solar farms without saying no solar farms.
Well, thank you all.
My 2 cents worth.
And I'm very torn myself in terms of how we can make some of this work. I don't think we can put everything we've talked about into a bylaw change. And I don't think we would want to necessarily. But I don't believe necessarily that an overlay district is probably the best way to go forward because of the justification of it, of trying to specifically justify the selection of lots based on public health, safety, and welfare. I don't see how that can be done, but I challenge some people who were championing the overlay district to work on it from that aspect before our next meeting, is look at it in terms of how we can justify it. What are the criterion of sites, the criteria that we would judge sites or lots by? And those of you who are leaning more toward, let's pick 1 or 2 impactful changes to the wording of the bylaw. Again, we need to justify it by the public health, safety, or welfare. And that is what each of us should be thinking about in terms of how we're going to justify these changes from a legal perspective as best we can. So realizing that maybe one of us is a lawyer, I don't know, but probably not many of us, and certainly not experts on this type of law. But we do the best we can, and we need to think about it from that perspective. And I think that we all have very similar ways of looking at this from our objectives and the needs of the community. And we're all trying to balance the varied needs and rights of all of the residents and people in town. So we just, it's the value of having a group of 10 people or so to discuss these types of things, because we each come at it from a slightly different perspective, and it's really good. It's really helpful. So thank you all. Let's see, when is our next meeting?
Through the chair.
Yes.
Along those lines, do you know how many meetings we have left in this term before we have to submit stuff if there is a town meeting? Did we lose Mary?
Yeah.
I think we just lost Mary.
Just as he was about to give the answer, that too.
John, do you happen to have that answer?
Yeah, to answer your question, the town meeting warrant opens January 4th and closes February 1st or February 4th, very beginning of February.
Does that mean like 3 meetings left if we, and, well, we got to get something to the planning board before that February?
Yeah, so planning board is going to be looking to hold their hearings on any zoning changes in January.
Oh, wow.
So Mary's not here, and maybe that's good. I would just like to respectfully offer a bit of frustration. We have spent the last maybe 4 meetings talking about wording to the bylaws, and I have happily entertained that. And then to be told now we have just a couple meetings left, and those who think the overlay is the best option, you figure out the best presentation for that now, is frustrating to me. That I, as a team member, said, yes, I will explore all of these zoning changes, even though from the beginning, my thinking was this is probably not going to be enough teeth. But I will do this because we will get to the overlay discussion. And now I think what the chair said is, those of us who think the overlay is the best plan, you better come back with some ideas, that it's now on us. And that was frustrating and a little sad for me to hear.
So I think, and I'm not trying to speak on behalf of Mary, and obviously not a member of this board, but I think we did some due diligence on the overlay. And maybe the realization was that there are so many lots that are viable for solar that maybe the majority of the people in the board didn't realize would be included, made the prospect of trying to identify lots to include and exclude a much bigger task than thought. So what would need to be done for an overlay to be discussable is to really come up with criteria. And I think we've talked about this from the beginning, criteria to include and exclude lots based on the test of whether those lots would protect the health, welfare, and health, well-being, and welfare of residents. So I don't know what the solution is. I think that's the task that Mary was outlining that needs to move forward, but how that should be done is up to all of you.
And again, respectfully, thank you, John. I agree with all that. We do need to explore how we delineate if that's a route we go. I just feel like as a group of 10, we worked on one thing. As a group of 10, we said, oh boy, this overlay is tough. Let's work on something else instead. Now we don't have time for the group of 10 to work on delineating what might make sense for an overlay. And that's what I'm offering is frustrating. Now that said, I did miss a meeting or 2 back in September, October, and maybe there was more done on those than I realized. But nonetheless, I will do what I can, and I hope that others will do what they can to look into the overlay. Because after all, at the town meeting in September, was it? I think what we heard when the vote was, do we, I can't remember the wording, but do we not vote on this now? Proponents of the overlay were asking, does this mean the overlay is dead, or is it going to come back for another vote? And the answer at the time was, it will, maybe with some changes, come back for another vote. And if we're now changing that, that means people in September voted for something that is now not coming true. And I think for those voters, that could be a frustrating thing as well. I'm not saying we have to propose an overlay. I'm saying it feels like that part was shoved to the side pretty quickly.
Ted, I think what happened is exactly what John was saying, is that once we got that map that showed all the potential sites, there's just too many potential solar farms in my book. And so that's where the discussion went off into, why don't we limit why don't we look at language to limit the solar farms? But I guarantee you, if we just change one word in our current solar bylaw from on a lot containing a minimum of 3 acres to a lot containing a maximum of 3 acres, this whole thing just goes away.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back.
Right. Madam Chair, I'm just going to jump in and hopefully address that statement. I think that while on the surface seems like it's the solution to the problem, I still haven't heard the justification as to how a 3-acre lot preserves the health, welfare, and well-being of residents enough to stand up in court.
Well, apparently it has stood up or has not been challenged in a couple of towns, John. And
Yeah, it hasn't been challenged. It hasn't been challenged.
I'm not afraid of that because we already have several solar farms. What I'm more challenged about is the fact that these things are getting plunked down just about anywhere. And
But Rhea, we just need the justification. We need to have
sure. And you know what?
specific things that we
Get
can.
a lawyer who actually goes into the definition of health, welfare, just like the other towns, and we're good. That's how these things go.
Yep.
Being afraid of being challenged is not a reason to stop doing zoning. That's just ridiculous. But what I do understand is the reason why it's the health, safety, and welfare of the community is because those are subjective points. You can make those be whatever you want them to be, basically. And all we have to do is get someone who's a really good writer to figure out why we don't need another solar farm. You know, I mean, this is, you know, and that's the bottom line. I mean, the other towns have done it. All we have to do is change one word in our current bylaw and we're good.
Okay, so that is what I want to have come back here from all of you, is that justification. Be those good writers, you know, plagiarize the heck out of the, the internet, figure it out, come up with some ideas of how we justify this. Any of the changes that, you know, you most believe in for these, in order to control and limit some of the solar development in our town. So that is what we need. We had set up a tentative meeting on December 28th, and I want to double check with people whether or not they can attend that date. Show of hands, yes?
Which date? Sorry, Mary, which date?
December 28th, Monday, December 28th.
Yes.
Okay. John?
I'm good.
Okay, you're good. Ron? Yep. Curtis?
Yes.
Okay. And Rhea?
Right
Can you
now,
do it?
yes.
Okay. Okay, that's all of us. John Gelsich, can you do it? Yep. Okay. Yeah, not doing a lot of traveling. So, okay. So
Through the chair, I do have to ask one question. Going back to what Ted said, I mean, would it be possible at all for us to do maybe one meeting only on the overlay? Just, and where I'm going with this is maybe identify a couple of suitable lots, which could be more of a sacrificial lamb to establish something, and then with the intent of locking down large tracts of land, but just providing something so that some kind of overlay can be explored. So can one of these meetings be to say, okay, here is a list of potential candidates, and here is a list of absolutely should not be there, inclusion versus exclusion kind of a list, and then explore if there is some give in that model. Just wondering, is there any ability for us to do that?
absolutely. But I'm going to challenge you to come up with some of the criteria that you would consider as being important, and then why that justification by the public health, safety, or welfare of, you know, this
Okay.
lot versus this lot. Okay.
Okay.
And that, you know, doesn't mean you can't like contact John in the next 2 weeks and you know, look at some maps with him or something like that. If you have questions, if you want to explore some of that, but then, yeah, I definitely, we could cover that right at the top of the meeting on the 28th and discuss that. But I really am going to challenge all of you to do the work separately in the next 2 weeks. to do the, or, you know, two of you can get together if you have, you know, things you want to bounce off each other. It's just, we can't do more than that in the public meeting. All right? Okay. Okay, so everything has to be considered in light of the whole public health, safety, or welfare, or mostly welfare. So, and I know it's squishy. I know it's a weird, very weird legal definition, but we have to get things down on paper. We have to have something. Maybe somebody else say that's a ridiculous reason, but it doesn't matter. You know, if we have something down and it passes our muster, at least we have something. And, you know, there's no guarantees that you know, it's all going to pass every scrutiny of law, but we have to do some review of it from that perspective. Okay. Okay. Did you all review the minutes, or did any of you review the minutes? Okay, I did. They looked fine to me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did read them. I thought you were asking, did we talk about them when you were offline?
No.
I did read them.
So that was me stopping sharing of my computer and then hitting the wrong button, and it said leave because it's in the same place as the share button. And then I tried to get back in. Actually, I was talking to John Gelsich for like a good 5 minutes and didn't understand why he wasn't replying. You know, okay.
In any case,
So,
to answer your question properly, I did review the minutes. I don't know.
okay. Does anyone have changes to the minutes, edits? Nope. Okay.
Nope.
I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second?
Seconded.
Thank you.
Oh, that was Rachel's opportunity.
Roll call vote. Okay. Curtis. Say
I'll
aye. Yep.
Aye.
Curtis, do you approve the minutes?
I do. All right.
Madhu?
Aye.
Rachel?
Aye.
Ted?
Ted, aye.
Sundar?
Sundar Sivaraman, yes.
Ria?
Ria, yes.
Ron?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Mary Larson Marlowe is a yes. So minutes are approved. We will meet again at 7 p.m. on Monday, December 28th. And y'all have homework. And feel free to contact me in the meantime. I respond best to emails. So, and you just, even if you just want to bounce something around and, you know, get, or you forgot what you're really trying to do and you need to be refocused, just let me know. Okay. Thanks. Okay.
Madam Chair, I will offer my services too. Feel free to reach out to me. Also best available by email.
Yes. Thank you very much, John. I appreciate that. Okay. Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
So
moved.
moved.
And a second? I don't know who moved it. So second?
Sundar Sivaraman.
Okay, second.
So moved.
All right. Roll call vote. Curtis?
Yes.
Madhu?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
Ted?
Ted, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Sivaraman, yes.
Ria?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Mary Larson Marlowe is yes. And I thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Mary.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Hey, happy
Mary.
holiday,
Happy
everybody.
holidays.
Christmas,
Happy holidays.
I guess.
Happy holidays. Thank you, Mary.
Happy Hanukkah.
Bye.
That's me today. Excellent. Be safe, everyone.
You too.
You too.